Welcome to part 3 of our Excel analysis for our final project. In the previous video, we were looking at the relationship between the number of cases and the number of deaths in whatever state you selected to analyze. So I ended last video by mentioning that I was interested in exploring whether the number of cases on a particular date didn't just influence the number of deaths on that same date, but the number of deaths in a future date. So I want to measure whether the number of cases offset by 1 week or 2 weeks. I'm going to explore those two different possibilities. So let me make another copy of this data set. So I'm going to go to right click and move and copy and click on create a copy. And I'm just going to rename this sheet cases and deaths correlation. We will be computing a correlation soon, but I'm going to delete the old chart because we have it over here. And I just want to create a couple new columns. To begin with, I'm going to move the confirmed cases over to the right just to make it easier. So I'm going to right click and copy and select column E and enter. And I'm going to delete the two columns B and C. Just I have Ontario in my other worksheets, so I'm just going to delete that, and I don't need two copies of the confirmed. And temporarily, I'm going to change the date to a long date because I want to see the day of the week in the in each cell just to make it easier to select. So I want to create two more columns. I'm going to call it cases minus 1 week and cases minus 2 weeks. And now I'm just going to put in some simple cell references to show the number of cases that were active 2 weeks ago. So to begin with, I'm going to do column E, the 2 weeks. So the earliest we have data is March 9th. So 2 weeks later would be Monday, March 23rd. So over here in column E, I'm going to reference the number of cases on March 9th. So 2 weeks ago, on March 23rd, there were 34 cases. And I want to see if that is going to be a better representation of the number of deaths on that same date. So I'm just going to autofill the rest of that column. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here for minus 1 week. So 1 week prior to March 23rd, it was a Monday. So Monday, March 17th, there were 177 cases 1 week ago. And I'll try to double click here to complete that column. All right, so now I'm going to create another chart. First, let me change this back to short date. The reason why I'm changing it back is on the chart, I don't want to clutter the axis. If we have the day of the week and the full name in the on the axis of the chart, it's just going to look extra cluttered. So I'm moving this back to short date, and now I'm just going to select all of this chunk of data and make one massive chart to compare by date the number of deaths and see all on one chart the trend lines for the 3 different levels of cases. So I'll go into insert and then line chart. I'm going to try to move my chart below the table here just for the purposes of the video. I noticed in the last video that some of the things that I were doing on the far right part of the screen weren't showing up. Okay, so we have the same issue that we have in our last chart in that the deaths are on a totally different scale, luckily, than the number of cases. So fewer people die than contract COVID-19. Let me add a chart title. And then I'm also going to add, I'm going to select my series here for the number of deaths, and I'm going to right click and select Format Data Series. And this might be off the screen on the video, but I have a option button where I can select secondary axis. So now I have two axes. This one represents the number of deaths, and this one represents the number of cases. You can see that there's like a really tight relationship between series 1, which is deaths, and which is our blue line, and the gray line, which is series 3, which happens to be the cases minus 1 week. But I don't want you to get overly influenced by that, because it's really the slope of the line of the four lines and how closely they match each other. So let me, just as an example, you don't have to include this in your analysis, but if I select my blue line, the deaths, or I'm sorry, select the axis over here. This is exactly what we did in the baseball assignment when we selected the number of runs between 1 and 6 runs so that it was always static. But I'm going to right click on this and format the axis. And again, this might not show up on the video, but I see the minimum and maximum. So if I change it to 2,000 as the maximum number of deaths, you can see that the shape of my lines totally change. So now this blue line almost looks like it's closer to our original, or I'm sorry, our 2-week slope than our 1 week. But again, it doesn't matter. The most important thing to show is we're going to compute the correlation here in a minute. So you could leave this scale as is, or I could undo it and change it to how it was before. I think I'll just click undo, and just so it's consistent with the one that goes up to 14 and our 1400 on our previous. Okay, so again, we want to label these axes so the user isn't confused by this 1400 scale versus this 18,000 scale. So I'm going to select my chart, and I'm going to select design, go into add chart element, and select a primary vertical title, which will be total confirmed cases. And after I type it, I'll click away, select the chart again, and add an axis title for the secondary vertical axis for deaths. So now to the user, they won't know if they're just looking. Remember, we're going to publish this on Google Sites, and we're not going to publish the table because that would just look kind of messy. But we are going to take a snapshot or a screenshot of the chart and move it in there as an image later. So the series 2, 3, 4, and 1 doesn't tell the user what this chart is about. So I'm going to go into, I'm going to select any of the series, and I'm going to right click and go into select data. And it actually gives us all 4 of our series. So I'm going to go into each one and I'm going to edit them. So for series 1, I'm going to type deaths as the series name. And then I'm going to select series 2, edit, and I'm going to type confirmed cases, and I'll do something similar for series 3. Which is confirmed cases minus 1 week. And confirmed cases minus 2 weeks. So now our chart is complete, and except for maybe some resizing, is ready to be published. So we have one more thing to do in this analysis, and I'll save that for the next video.